Hi everyone, my name's Joe, and I'm on the channel iCanHazDraw. Today I'm going to teach you how to draw Count Dracula. I hope you enjoy. So what we want to start off with is a basic Y shape. I'm going to go for the kind of lifting the cape, looking evil, kind of crazy pose here. So basically, like I said, Y shape. You can start with basic shapes to do his different parts, like a circle up top for his head, bit of a square kind of shape for his torso. I'm doing right here, right now. Also, kind of getting ready to lay down his arms as well. See, I've also for his shoulders, I've drawn little circles and ellipses to try to plot those out when you build the character. And again, for his waist, I've done another circle to kind of connect the lower side to the chest, to the torso. So here for his arms, I'm starting to do ellipses and more circles to connect to the joints and to his hands. Basic character construction steps. Also, I'm going to do his neck with a bit of a more lines such, and doing again fleshing out those arms, doing the hands again. Doing basic shapes just to start out is always a good thing to do. Also, for your hands, you're going to draw more circles within them as well for the knuckles and the fingers. So, just your basic building of a character to begin. See, for his legs, I'm starting to draw more ellipses. A lot of ellipses when you create a character for the limbs. Kind of getting his pants ready. See those little flaps near the bottom. At the moment I had his feet out of the view of the camera, but I'll fix that in just a moment. And again, when you start the face, it's always good to draw a line in the circle, at the center of the circle when you're drawing it, when you're plotting out where you're going to put his facial features and everything. So it's good to kind of plan that out with lines and other dashes on the circle where you draw the head. And here I'm kind of going for the bat ears. I always like to draw like elf bat ears on Dracula, kind of hint that he's a bat monster guy, a vampire. So now I'm drawing some sleeves on there. Yeah, it's going alright. Kind of making some fabric, or excuse me, the clothing, the cape is kind of drooping over his shoulders and kind of redoing the chest here, it seems. Yeah, totally redoing them, making it a little bit longer from what I can tell here. Yeah, and fleshing out the legs. Always good to do that. More ellipses for the limbs. When you do feet, I always try to start with the basic triangular shape, kind of rounded at the ends. Not like your usual triangle with the sharp edges or so, but kind of like a triangular shape, a little bit more rounded. And for here, when you start plotting your facial features onto the head, always draw circles for the eyes, kind of make them big, and since we're going for a cartoony image here, it's always good to make them big. And reinforcing the ears, making them bigger too, to kind of make him cartoony and fun. And I'm going to give him a big smile, for Dracula anyways. Here we start drawing his vest and his shirt. Also, Dracula's famous medallion, he's always got to have that. Fleshing out the hips and the torso, at the bottom of the torso here. And then reinforcing the feet again, fleshing that out a little bit too. Seeing if I can get more of a foot shape, just from what I started out with the triangular shapes. more on his vest. Gonna flesh it out a little bit, and then we see we're gonna do the little cuffs on the neck of his shirt. And here we are, doing some more details on the hands and the arms. Now, just making more details on the cape, fleshing it out a little bit more on here too. Dracula's got to have a cape, so. This is always a fun part, doing the eyes, always drawing little circles within the other circles, and lines to illustrate his facial expressions. Always a fun thing to do. Just trying to clean up some of my mess here. Very sketchy to begin with, so I always try to clear it up when I'm in mid-sketch. Again, hands are really tricky. They're always a challenge. A good challenge, though, so one thing I always try to do is to draw circles within the hands where you would usually have your knuckles and the palm to illustrate where you're going to plot to draw those fingers and such. It's always a good thing to try out. I'm trying to clear up some space so I can get those facial features in there. Also coloring in his hair. He's going to have jet black hair. Dracula always has jet black hair. And here we go, giving Dracula a big smile, and a big toothy smile. Some more cleanup. Always good to clean up and try to go back in and get those smaller details after doing the base sketch. And totally revamp his hands here.
Revamp, was that pun intended?
Yeah, you could say that. Revamp. He's a vampire. Just again, trying to get those little details into the hands, so I can get ready to ink them. Sometimes it doesn't always go as well as planned, so that's why I have an eraser. Always restart.
Seems the biggest thing is just getting the basic shapes in there and then coming back and then just reworking it until you get exactly what you wanted.
Most definitely, yeah. And I'm drawing some cufflinks. They're pretty big cufflinks, I admit, but it's a cartoon, so you can take liberties. You don't have to be so accurate. And you can always, when you draw cartoons, I always try to stretch the imagination and exaggerate. It's not as easy as it sounds, but a lot of practice and you'll definitely get there. But that's what makes cartoons so fun. They just take basic ideas and they blow them up, make them crazy, and have them 10 times bigger, crazy sizes, shapes. That's probably one of the best things about cartooning, is just trying to make it look crazy and have fun and exaggerate your shapes and such. That's one thing I love to do. So I kind of have my basic sketch done here. Probably a little bit more I'm going to go into and scribble it more and erase, as always.
You're talking about the stretching the image of the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Your bat that I saw on Facebook that got me interested in and come to do this was it reminded me of Bartok from Anastasia. Have you ever seen that movie?
I don't think I've seen that one, but I know what you're talking about. It's the one with it's from like the 90s, the animated one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just.
They have a white bat in there that looked a lot like his. I mean, as far as the style and how he was basically acting, it just really reminded me of Bartok.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm kind of getting ready for the ink, darkening up some lines here. I got some basic folds in the clothing. I don't want to go too in-depth with folding clothes with a cartoon image. I only do basic ones. Is when you... Basically, the big detailed folds in clothing are for comic book style illustrations, which are also lots of fun. And when you do portraits, that's a lot, and that's when you really want to go into detail with those. So I do some basic ones, and these here in his cape are just gonna kind of illustrate basic principle that he's got it, that it's folded and such. I made him big and dark, trying to make him pop out a little bit more. Again, working on the outside of the cape. So now we're going to start inking. So just, of course, I gotta erase a couple more lines. Very meticulous about getting that done, getting it right. So we're gonna try to redraw this and then start inking. Redoing the waist here, adding more details to his feet. I just now remembered before I started inking, I remembered I had to work on those a little bit more too on his shoes. So now we begin the ink. Very, very careful when we ink. I kind of sketch it out a little bit, but I go a lot slower when I try to start my inking. One thing I'm using is one of those Sakura Micron pens. They're really handy. They're probably my favorite things to ink with. You come in a variety of widths and sizes. You can really get in there and get tiny little details with these pens. They're very handy. A little expensive, but they're worth it. So, starting out with the basic outline on the outside. One thing you can do that really helps in a cartoon image when you ink is when you do the outside lines, really make them thick. So that really helps the image pop out a little bit more. You might see me here in a minute go over my lines that I've already done on the outside, just trying to make it thicker and more, give it more presence. So that's also a good thing to try when you draw cartoon images, when you're inking them. There we go, drawing more outlinings. When you use these pens, you'll notice when you get in the really small areas where you have really small nooks and crannies when you're wanting to ink them and be accurate, the pen width really helps a whole lot. And these are really small tips, so you can get into there and get a good clean line, and when you get that, it'll really show and it'll really look good. Very handy pens, I love them.
At what point would you want a thicker pen?
Well, you could do thicker pens when you do like this stage, when you're doing the outlines, when you're coloring in specific parts of the drawing, when you want to ink, say you have like, later on when you do his hair, there's a big black space you want to fill in. You could get a thicker pen to do that too. Those are when the thicker pens really usually help as well. This one I'm using, I think, is a 05, I believe it was. So I kind of sketched it. I could have used a smaller one doing the inside designs, or the inside lines, but rather I just decided to sketch it out this time. I have a couple others. I have one I use in a little bit here that's a 01. It's really small. That's a really helpful one. There's one even smaller than that, a 005.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's
That's
really...
incredibly small.
Yeah, and that gets tiny, tiny, tiny little strokes. They're really helpful, though. I think the 01 might be my favorite, and the 5 is really good, and the 3 is really good, too. You can buy a pack of them. It comes with different sizes and shapes for about $20 at Hobby Lobby.
That's not terrible.
Yeah, it's a good price, and it gives you a pencil, too. Always good to have a mechanical pencil.
Yeah, considering the set of colored pencils, how much those cost?
Well, it ranges depending on what you buy. Prismacolor is the big expensive one. I've bought some of their stuff. They're pretty good, but they're definitely worth the buying them. But they are pretty pricey though. But they look good when you apply them onto the paper. I think later on I was using a Prismacolor black marker to color in the inside of his cape. And here we go, just doing more lines inside and filling in the sides here on his waist. Really basic waist here. I didn't go too in depth with it. His torso's kind of basic as well, and just decided to make some basic shapes to draw his clothing.
For the detail we want the focus to be, right?
Yeah. One good thing I always usually try to do when I'm connecting lines that are on other lines is to, near the edge where you see little lines to connect to another, you can fill them in just a little bit, and they'll bring a little bit more of a darker look, and it'll help them pop out just a little bit more. But you don't want to do it too big, or it'll look like a big black blob where the lines connect. I only do it a little bit.
So you widen the line that's connecting to another?
Well, when they connect, like, see here at the side where his vest meets the drooping part of the cape,
Okay.
there's a little tiny space that you can kind of fill in a little bit with a little bit more black.
Yeah.
Probably have to zoom in a little bit more to show it, but here we go, outlining the smile with his toothy face. Always love that. When you draw, one thing I love to do with cartoon characters is give them very large ears. Something about it helps bring the face, brings your attention to it. It makes it pop more. Gives him that goofy cartoon look. I love it. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of see that bat in his face as well.
Yeah.
With the proportions you have. That's awesome.
Thank you. Twist it around a little bit to see if we can get my hand in there correctly. Sometimes that's a very good thing to do. Just twist your sketch pad or your piece of paper around, and if your hand's it's a little hard to sometimes get in those specific spaces where you want to ink, so it's very helpful. Of course, we want to give Dracula some thick eyebrows for a sinister vampire kind of look. Here we go, outlining his eyes. And draw little circles within his eyes as well to make his pupils. And little lines across the circle often gives it the look of his eyes are narrowing and it's looking all sinister and vampiric. Connecting some lines here. Drawing out these little folds in his drooping cape over his arms. after you apply the ink, it's always good to erase so you don't get any kind of inking lines confused with the actual sketch lines, and clean it up a little bit. When you're going into the face and you gotta look for small lines you might be missing, or you want to clean one up, definitely wait a sec for the ink to dry and then see if you can then erase it and then go back in there. That's usually very helpful. When you erase as well, your eraser might pick up some of the ink and take it off the page. Different kinds of papers have different kinds of ways of accepting the ink as well, and so you may need to go over it a couple times. So this is what I'm doing right here. So we definitely, for a cartoon image, we now have bold black lines to kind of illustrate the picture. Really helps in bringing the character out. Here we do some little hand inking. Trying to ink his palm here to where he's gripping his cape. If you ever have trouble with hands, always look at your own hand and see how like in here we have him grabbing his cape, trying to like grab a piece of cloth or something, and look at how your hand grabs it. Look at it from the side, like we have a profile view of it, and try that and see if and then sketch that a couple times, see if you can get the hang of that. Referencing your own hands is always a good thing to do when you're trying to draw them. Here we go, giving the little details in his face. Right here I went back with the pencil to try to do some basic lighting in his hair to give him that little shiny look of that he's got his hair slicked back. So I gave him a little bit of this is where I used the tiny pen. I gave him a little bit of shiny hair here, and I'm using a smaller pen to go in and go around those lines that I drew on his head. And to really be careful here, because this is where those tiny pens really help, getting small details in there. Now, with a cartoon image, you're not going to do a whole lot of small details, but a couple of them are pretty good here and there. So I just did the basic one of giving him his hair a little bit of shine here. And I think that was more than enough to really illustrate his hair was slicked back. So, also with the eyes, I draw little lines over the eyelids to make it look like his eyelids have a little weight to them, and make it look like he's not so much squinting, but narrowing his eyes, looking all like the Prince of Darkness that he is. Drawing his little cufflinks. And again here, I think just more filling in lines that I didn't notice before that have gotten erased. Drawing some basic clothing folds. Don't want to go too in depth. Here's some basic little details on his cuffs, on his neck. Here we are trying to put some ink to the folds in his cape, just the basic folds to kind of accentuate the character. Trying to illustrate the vertical pose here with these, just some basic lines, nothing too in depth, but enough to kind of illustrate the droopiness of the cape and his pose. And since I had a little bit of space to actually put ink in there, that's where I believe I start using my marker to fill those in. And here we are, just erasing a lot more of the actual sketch lines. I kind of go back and forth when I ink a drawing. Sometimes I leave the sketch lines in there just for reference, and I don't get to it all. I erase some, then go back and erase others, work on different parts. Where I was working on his head earlier, we're now working on the cape. So I was using one marker here, but that died. So here's my Prismacolor marker filling in those little spaces. It's always fun to color in these big black spaces. Made the edges of them a little bit pointy, a little spiky to try to accentuate and try to illustrate the curves of the actual fabric. But you'll notice I'll need to switch this around a little bit, and I'll need to get really light near the edges and sketch them out. Be really careful at this point, because the marker was really thick, and so it was a little difficult. But I managed to do it all right. You just got to be careful when you get near the edges, or you can just switch to a pen that has a smaller tip.
So, what are the benefits of turning the paper sideways?
Well, just for me, being left-handed, just getting close to the part, and sometimes doing a downward stroke can be a little bit difficult. So when I twist the paper, I myself am more usually comfortable with horizontal strokes myself. So that helped me out a lot. And here we are, just adding a little bit more darker ink to the picture. Just kind of finishing up anything that may have been kind of lightly erased from the eraser, adding just a little bit more detail to the cape. Coloring and putting in the little creases in his fingers. Those aren't the most detailed hands I've drawn, but I think they get the point across.
I like the proportion compared to the rest of them. They appear like they're closer.
Oh.
Because hands are reaching forward a little bit.
I see.
And their shape is very
Trying to do that.
creepy.
Yeah, trying to illustrate like Bela Lugosi does in the original Dracula film from Universal. He always has his hands trying to hypnotize you, so I was kind of going for that too. But yeah, here we are, just a little bit more outline work. And there you have it, Count Dracula. Oh, well, actually, I gotta erase something really quick, but. Again, here I go again. Just working on more lines, making sure I don't forget anything. And that's about it. There's Count Dracula. Hope you enjoyed watching, and stay tuned for more drawing videos. Thanks again.